Right, good evening, and thank you for joining us. It's a Friday night. There is, of course, a lot going on in the country, and if you want to know what the news is, then the news will be up at exactly 9 o'clock, and it is worth taking a look at today. But today, I want to break from talking about what goes on in the news to talking about something far more important. I'm joined this evening by someone I admire greatly, Pooja Bhatt, who is a film director, filmmaker, actor, voiceover artist, producer, and a woman made of a different kind of iron, who's been so brave talking about her story and sharing with the world the story that she has been through, battling alcoholism and depression. And when I read her post, when she talked about now being sober for 5 years, it was so powerful because I realized women don't talk about this. Women don't talk about battling alcoholism at all. Women don't talk about winning that fight or not winning that fight. They don't talk about the support that they get from their families and otherwise. And because there is this shroud of silence around mental health, around alcoholism, around substance abuse, how would women ever get the help they need if we don't create safe spaces for women to talk about it? So I reached out to Pooja Bhatt and asked her if she'd be willing and comfortable to talk about it on my show. And she said yes immediately. And my respect for her has only grown. So this is a space where I'm just clearing some room and giving her room to tell her story so that other women could hear it and learn from it and maybe gain the strength and courage they need to get help if they need to get help. So joining me this evening, Pooja Bhatt. Ms. Bhatt, thank you so much for making time and for agreeing to have this conversation. I think it's extremely brave of you to talk about it. But if I were to just take you back to, and I know you've told this story before, to when you decided that, hey, listen, I need to get help. What was that like? Especially at a time when there were no women talking about this at all. Yes.
For some people, there is no rock bottom in that sense. And I think that I was one of those people who had the mental and the emotional makeup, something that I inherited from my father, a very alive human being, somebody who lived and drank fully and freely and copiously, and I inherited that. So as a young girl, it was absolutely okay because I come from a home that's very unique. My mother is Christian, my father is an atheist. My grandmother was Muslim, my grandfather is a Brahmin. And Christmas was a big part of my existence and growing up. And, there was always a bottle of wine or a bottle of champagne that was available to us to kind of imbibe from. And one day you realize that that's become an escape. And one day you realize that the bottle is actually kind of fulfilling a need in you that the average human being is not being able to do. So there was a voice within me that kept asking me that, is this going to be the way I'm going to lead my life? And that question was there. But I think it was in a conversation with my father, just a random conversation we were having about the state of the world. And he signed off by saying, I love you, kid. And my response to him was, you know what? I love you too, Pops. And it was his response to that message that actually changed the course of my life. So I think just to rewind a bit and to just kind of jog everyone's memory on whoever's been hearing is that you asked me that what was it that actually turned the key in that sense. So I think it was a message that I received from my father when, he just said to me that I love you, kid. And I said, I love you too, Pops. And he said to me that, well, if you love me, then love yourself. Because I live in you. And it was not those words, it was what I read in between those words that made me promise him and myself that I'm going to be the best me. But what did I do that night, Faye? I went out and I drank Christmas Eve, December 2016. So I pulled my phone off the hook, put my mobile on silent, locked myself into my little apartment in a by-lane of Bandra with my 4 cats, where I could hear Silent Night wafting in from the neighbor's house and I could hear the church bells ring. And I brought in Christmas sober. And I woke up on the 25th of December feeling like I'd conquered Mount Everest. I'm going to be this person for my life and I'm going to take responsibility for my actions. And I just set forth on this course of sobriety and each day was a revelation. each day was a summit that I would kind of climb, and I felt like I had achieved so much. And I think that I wouldn't be here sitting in front of you if I had not taken that course. I don't think I would have been able to survive the pandemic. I don't think I would have been able to survive the uncertainty of what the world was thrust into. I don't think I would have been able to survive that vicious campaign that was waged against my father and the film industry at large in 2020, with that tragic death of Sushant Singh Rajput, where the discourse on mental health and addiction was reduced to banality, which kind of forced so many people who might have been struggling with the same battle to kind of think a million times before actually seeking help, because they made it seem like as if it was criminal to have a weakness in that sort, or have be afflicted with a disease. 2 drinks could affect you very differently and affect somebody else very differently. It's got to do with your chemistry. It's got to do with what traits you're born with. And for me, somebody who was born to an alcoholic, my father has been sober for 32 years now, you know. I mean, I'm still in that honeymoon phase of 5 years in that sense. And you're 4 times more susceptible as a child of an alcoholic to become an alcoholic yourself. And the irony is that my launch came from a film called Daddy, where I play a 17-year-old girl who weans her father off alcohol. And there I was at the age of 46 in a situation where I had to then wean myself off alcohol. But coming to why I spoke about it, I think I drank openly, so I decided to recover openly. And I felt that I had the privilege of family and friends who allowed me to bare my soul and say out loud that, you know what, I have a problem, and didn't beat me into a corner for it. Unfortunately, majority of the world does not have that privilege, which is why you have an Alcoholics Anonymous, because people have to go out there and share with strangers who won't judge them. Because alcoholism, addiction, you know, it cuts across class, it cuts across all barriers, because, you know, it doesn't pick and choose. It's not different from COVID. It doesn't check out your bank balance. It doesn't check out where you come from in that sense. So I felt that it was important for me to share my journey, not to be some role model, but to feel that if there's somebody out there who somewhere feels and asks themselves that question that, you know, do you think I have a problem with this? Then I wanted them to know that they were not alone. I wanted them to know that.
Have people come up to you in the last 5 years and say, hey, because you talked about it, I found the strength? Did you find more women sort of tell you about their problems because you were brave enough to talk about it?
Well, I was very moved yesterday, Faye, because a friend of mine, Shivani, she sent me a message on Twitter, actually, and she said, Pooja, I just want to tell you that, you know, after reading your story and how honest you are, I've been sober for 3 months. And I realized through the pandemic that I was abusing alcohol, and I've decided to quit it. And what is being a role model? Only talking about your wins? Only talking about how much you've kind of gone out there and achieved? What is achievement? I think it's important for people to know that, hey, somebody who I've liked, or somebody whose performance I've enjoyed, or somebody whose actions I've kind of been, inspired by, they bleed like I do. They hurt like I do. They're vulnerable and they're prone to falling. And I'm very aware that 5 years does not mean I've beaten this. I could slip tomorrow. I could slip right now. You know, it's right there. It's right there. So I think in these uncertain times that we live in, you know, death is just around the corner. It's everywhere. And you can slip right back into your addiction. It could be anything, not only grief, but even highs. I mean, you know, when Bombay Begums went through the roof and did so well for me, I mean, 21 years later to face the camera and then get that kind of genuine applause and acknowledgement. I mean, I'm so grateful to Alankrita for seeing me with new eyes. That could have been a time that I could have gone quite mad.
So it's a battle that you have to fight when you're doing well and when you're doing badly. So it's always there. When you're lonely, when you're with friends, when, you know, in every single type.
Especially when you're doing well. It's the highs. It's the highs that, it's the highs that you need to be more frightened of, because it's when the highs appear, the frauds appear. When you're down and out, there are very few people who want to spend time in your company, you know. But when, like, success has many friends, And when they come out of nowhere, they kind of try to tell you that, it's all right, it's okay, you've been 5 years sober, come on, have a sip.
When men battle alcoholism and when women battle alcoholism, are two completely different ways of looking at it, right? Women are not considered victims of it because, I mean, let's be honest, media has also, and films and ever portray women who drink as bad people, but not as victims of a disease, which is what it is.
I mean, I look far. I mean, let's look at my launch, Daddy. Daddy was a film about a father who was an alcoholic. Again,
yes.
Oh, you're there. Okay. And he decided to kind of leave his child to her grandparents, and suddenly came back when she was 17 and decided to kind of reclaim that equation. And society gave him the opportunity to do that. My question to my father used to always be, I said, what if it was reversed? What if it was a story about a mother who left a child behind because she was too in love with the bottle, or she was too kind of caught up with her addiction? Would society permit her to come back 17 years later and to reclaim a relationship with her child? Because a woman is never given that privilege. A woman is kind of looked upon as a demon if she decides to kind of walk away from a child. So I think that even addiction is kind of somewhere become a male domain. It's become a mainstay in that sense. And I think that we need to get up there and we need to be able to reclaim our spaces, because I think that, women can endure more. So believe me, they can drink more. And no one talks about, the loneliness, and no one talks about the acute kind of despair of the average housewife who has lost all communication. I mean, I was in a marriage for 10 years, and then one of the reasons it broke down was because communication died. I mean, people wanted me to kind of pin it on somebody else and say that, oh, did you meet someone else and that's why you ended your marriage? And I'm like, no, I became achingly lonely in that marriage. That was wonderful at a certain point. And I'd made a promise to my husband that I was never going to look over his shoulder. And he was my best friend. And I had to approach that. And I had to kind of look him in the eye and say that something within me is dying because the communication is dead. And people ask me today, oh, you're single, aren't you lonely? I said, not as lonely as I was in a marriage that was falling apart. There's nothing lonelier than being in a relationship with somebody who you have lost all communication with. And a lot of women out there know what I am saying because they endure that for more reasons than one. I had the privilege at that point of saying, I'm 40, I don't have children involved, it's now or never. And I chose to walk away from that. And I chose to rewrite my narrative. I said it doesn't have to be happily ever after, that they lived happily ever after. It could well be, and she lived happily ever after. And I said that I needed to find myself. And then what did I do? I think I drank the most in the last 2 years of my marriage failing. And for the 2 years after that, because I think that one was to cope with this vacancy and the silence that had kind of inhabited my space and my heart. And then when I decided to end things, I didn't give myself the chance to mourn, because ending a relationship is like death. It's no different from losing somebody physically. And the world wanted me to be okay. And I said, I'm fine. I'm all right. I've got this. But I hadn't got it. And I hadn't aired my grief about it. So I chose to drink far more. And that's when one day the penny dropped and I said, no, this can't be it. What am I doing? Replacing one thing with another? So whether it's a bottle you pick, whether it is a dysfunctional relationship you pick, whether it's work. See, work pays somebody. Your family will benefit from it. Somebody benefits from that. You're bringing money home. So people don't look at workaholism like they do at they look at alcoholism. But these are all ways to fill a void within you. And I think that the problem really lies with the world, Faye. I mean, we're living in a damaged, broken world that would rather give you painkillers to be able to kind of numb yourself with, whether it's in the form of alcohol or it's in the form of kind of, giving you goals where you feel that, okay, I bought that car, it'll numb the pain. I've got that kind of apartment, now it'll numb the pain. And you realize that the higher you go, it feels the same. But nobody's talking about fixing the world. Nobody is talking about taking that inherent kind of despair away in that sense. And I think that now, there's, like I mentioned to you earlier, it's the politics of silence, a conspiracy of silence that we are all kind of caught up with, where we can't name certain things, where we can't say certain things. So I think that, eventually women need to get up and tell themselves that, our despair is as valid, our needs are as valid, and it's not a moral weakness if you decide to find solace in a bottle and everything around you is failing you. Nobody chooses, to be dependent. And when you talk about freedom, I mean, I'd like to believe I was a very free person. I asked myself, is that freedom? You're dependent on a bottle. So what freedom are you talking about, Miss Bhatt? I had to ask myself that very harsh question. So I think that I've inherited this genetic flaw or gift where I'm able to look myself in the eye and really pull down all the defenses and be extremely stark and harsh with myself. And it's sometimes very difficult because you've got to pull yourself apart and make yourself back again because no one's going to do it for you. But I think that if there's one thing I learned from my father is that it's more important to be kind than it is to be right. It's more important to touch people than it is to charm people or impress people. And the only way you can really make any connection with anybody out there is when you speak from the heart. And speaking from the heart is not all joy and it's not all chic and all kind of lovely. It's despair.
So, the other thing I wanted to ask you about is the idea of talking about mental health. I would have liked to think that we've gotten better in the last 5 or 10 years from where we looked at things. But the last 1 year has told us that we've not. In fact, the situation that you were talking about with the whole Sushant Singh Rajput coverage, the thing that bothered me the most is that tomorrow, if there's someone who's feeling desperate and distressed and suicidal and they reach out to a friend, that friend is going to say, hey, I will be the last message you sent. The police is going to come after me. The media is going to come after me. So I'd rather stay out of it. It was a terrible display of how to handle that situation.
Absolutely. That's what bothered me the most about it too. It was not because, they were personal kind of attacks on my family. My family is made of tough stuff. They know who they are. We know who we are. And tough times don't last. Tough people do. And I think the last 1 year has proven that. But I think that what really, really broke my heart was that the discourse on mental health, the kind of, witch hunt with regards to anybody who might have at any point used any sort of substance would take a whole generation of people into the, into the background and say, you know what, we are never going to ask for help because we'll be criminalized. And that's exactly what we should not be doing. You need to be talking to each other. You need to be kind of creating an atmosphere where the youth especially is going to be able to come out there and to be able to air their grief, to be able to air their weaknesses. So I think that there was much damage done in that entire phase. And I think that it's going to take us a long, long time to undo that. I think we went back into the dark ages with that tragic incident. And it was that, it was COVID. In 2019, 2020, the beginning of 21 has not been easy. I've lost 6 of my dearest friends. And what became my lifeboat was sobriety. If I was not sober, I do not think I would have been able to kind of endure any of these kind of, storms that the universe kind of sent, not only my way, but it came at everyone. I don't know a single person who's not felt acute loss and lost somebody extremely close to them in the last 1 year. So I think that talking about it is essential. I mean, when you talk about, a doctor will tell you that internal bleeding is more dangerous. When you bleed, when you can see the wound and when you're bleeding, there are more chances of you surviving, but a concussion can kill you. And it's the same with grief. It's the same with addiction. It's the same with pain. You're trying to find answers that you can't get from society, that people are failing you on, and the bottle delivers. Why do you think it's so successful? Why do you think alcohol sells the amount it does? Because it works. Why do you think drugs, the war on drugs has never been won globally? Because drugs for certain people work. Mm-hmm. And that's the harsh truth.
How important is it to have a family that understands and is supportive of your daily battle?
It is important, but I think that, you can be born to the same parents and not have, courage is not hereditary. I have 3 other siblings and we are all very different from each other. While I had a father who had been through that battle himself, so he had far more empathy and he was a rock through this entire phase of mine, not only for me, but even for my sister Shaheen, when she kind of aired her story about the depression that she'd been dealing with as a young child. I also had within my own family a very close relative who somewhere, I think, despised me for the fact that I was able to acknowledge that I had a problem and then was able to kind of somewhere get on top of that beast called addiction. Because you become a reminder to your friends and your family, people who might be battling the same thing themselves but don't have the gall to admit it to themselves. You're a reminder to them that they have a problem too and that they can't kind of face that. So people don't want you around, which is what I said earlier. You want to find out who your friends are, get sober. You'll be amazed. People will just drop off the map. I've been told things like, oh, you're not fun anymore. You're boring. You don't laugh at our jokes. If you love me, have a drink. It's my birthday, have a drink. It's my anniversary, have a drink. Just one sip for me. Come on. You're stronger than that. You can have one sip. And I'm like, no. And to say no is not easy, but it's so empowering. So I think that's what life has taught me. The ability to be able to say no to myself, I think, is the greatest attribute that I've managed to acquire in the last while. And I think that nothing would have played out the way it has in the last 5 years if I hadn't given
Are those the friends to drop, the ones that don't understand the battle and are not willing to be
Absolutely.
supported?
I think that, see, any addict, anybody who, when I say addict, I would say love is an addiction too. When you're in love with somebody, you'll move mountains to be able to see that person. You lie to your family, you lie to your best friends, you'll steal, you'll cheat, you'll do whatever it is to get that fix to be able to spend time with your beloved. For some people, it's a person. For some people, it's a bottle. For some people, it's the smoke. For some people, it's something else, So I think that somewhere along the line, I think that addiction is selfish. Recovery must be even more selfish. And I think that you need to understand that anybody who's going to be able to get into your head and be toxic for you, it's not only a substance that's toxic. People are very toxic. Very often you drink to escape your surroundings. More often than not, you drink to escape your surroundings. Because you can't deal with something or you can't deal with the situation. You drown yourself in a bottle. And it's easy to forget for that one. You numb yourself out.
Is that how one could recognize that they have an addiction or a problem? If there's something that I need on a daily basis as a fix in order to face my own life and can't do without it, is that what an addiction is?
Well, that's the trick. A lot of people ask me, but do you have a drink in the day? And I'm like, if I was on holiday, I would love to have a glass of champagne or a bottle of champagne in the day with lunch and go to bed by 8 p.m. because I'm not one of those stay up all night and drink butter chicken finally at 5 a.m. to kind of absorb all the whiskey in my soul. It's a very Indian trait to be able to drink all night and then because you tell yourself that नहीं मैं तो दिन में शराब नहीं पीती हूँ यार मैं तो दिन में शराब नहीं पीता हूँ या मैं अकेले शराब नहीं पीता हूँ.
Yes.
I would love to drink on my own. I loved my own company. I would sit down with a bottle of champagne or I would pour myself a whiskey and I had my books and I had music and I had myself and my imagination. I think those were wonderful evenings. So I think these are all things you tell yourself, oh, I don't drink every day. I only drink on weekends. I don't drink in the day. I only drink after dark. I can go 3 months without drinking. No. That one drink that you drink in 1 year, if it alters your personality, if it plays havoc with your insides, and then after you've had that one drink, you can't wait for the second and you can't stop, you have a problem. That's the thing. It's not one size fits all. But I think deep down, Deep down, everybody who has a problem knows. It's just bravado that they use to kind of tell themselves that no. And then some people say, we might have a problem, but we would rather live with that problem. And I didn't wait for a medical intervention. I didn't wait to be told by a doctor that, you know what, if you have one more drink, you're going to die. Luckily, my survival instinct is kind of pretty strong. And just when I'm about to kind of hit rock bottom, whether it's been in a relationship or with my relationship with booze for that matter, something kicked in. And I just pulled myself up and I swam to that surface out of that murky water, and I was able to save myself. And there's a power that's bigger than me that's kind of given me that strength. So I don't believe I've done this on my own completely. I mean, you know, Psalm 88 says that my only companion is darkness. But I understand that as being that not merely living with darkness or enduring it, but singing to that darkness. So I think that to make your vulnerability your strength, to make your kind of, you know, what they tell you to hide away, what they tell you to kind of cover up. Don't show your scars to the world. Don't talk about that phase of your life. Don't show that your heart is broken. No, that is what makes you. And you need to go out there and you got to air your kind of weaknesses, because that's the only way you're going to heal.
You know, you did talk about Bombay Begums, which was such a powerful story. Each of those stories were powerful. And there's so much to be said about women writing characters of women that are real and flawed and struggling and battling, as opposed to the really black and white sort of, saint or whore type of binary that used to be available back in the 80s or the 90s. Do you think that it's also important for storytellers now to take responsibility for the kind of, you know, image they portray and build up for women?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, you know, I mean, Bombay Begums, I think that was groundbreaking in many ways. And I think that it was a show made by women for women. And I think that Alankrita just knew all these people. So, I mean, she just knew them all, and it was all on paper. There was nothing that kind of, you know, was fed to us later in that sense. But I think that she was clear about the fact that these are not your cookie cutter kind of good or bad. I think it's the gray areas that fascinated her. And I think that, aren't we that as women? Aren't we all of those things? I mean, why do we have to be one or the other? And I think that is what terrifies the average man, that we are not one or the other. And that's where patriarchy stems from. You know, the fact that I think that, like I said earlier, that we can endure far more pain. We can kind of actually have a lot more pleasure. And that is something that men want to kind of somewhere strangle within us, because it kind of reveals them as being people who are pretty one-dimensional in many ways. I mean, not that I love men, but some of my dearest friends are men, please. I mean, not to intimidate any men out there. But I think that that's where it stems from, is basically the sheer fear that women are actually quite okay on their own.
Also, the idea that as a woman, you don't need to be written off in every life stage, right? So there's this whole idea that, oh, you know, she's divorced, so you can write her off. Or she's an alcoholic, you can write her off. Or she's had issues, mental health issues. Somehow, the fact that women can battle these things and come back whole and, you know, part of society, a giving member of society, a stable member of society, is still something that a lot of people have to get used to.
Well, I was written off in all of those ways. I mean, I was a star at, like, I started at 17. By 19, I was a star. By 21, they said I'm a has-been. And, you know, oh, now she's married. Oh, now the marriage is ended. Oh, she's an alcoholic. Oh, okay. So she's given up alcohol. But because, I mean, once you've been an actor, and when you've been an actor in a film that is kind of, you know, somewhere caught the imagination of an entire generation, like Dil Hai Ki Mandani did in that sense, they cannot understand why you'd want to step away from the limelight and step behind a camera. You just cannot understand that. I mean, why would you want to retreat to the shadows is something that everybody within the industry asked me. And I think that if I hadn't done that, Faye, if I hadn't actually stepped back, where I was able to then look beyond myself and look at the world around me and kind of feel a certain kind of connect to the world around me, I don't think I would have been able to do what I did in Bombay Begums. I don't think I would have been able to bring that life experience to the fore. And I think that as artists and as actors, you're nothing without your life experiences. I mean, you can technically pull off something, but there's no alternate to a lived life. And I think that I'm so grateful that Alankrita saw all of that in me. She saw the battles that I'd fought, the ones I'd won, the ones I'd lost. And she wanted me to come to the field with my scars And she didn't want to change a damn thing about me. She wanted me to play 49 unapologetically. And I didn't at any point have to cover up a kind of a roll of fat that was appearing around my waist, because that's where your waist goes when you're approaching 49, even though I'm not a mother. I mean, women's bodies change with motherhood. They change when you're nearing menopause. They change with time. And unfortunately, that we do this to each other as women, and we play up to some ideal where people look at you and they say, oh, but you don't look like the way you did when you were 19. I cannot look like the way I did when I was 19. There's something called gravity. Something called, it takes over. So I think that somewhere we play up to that. So it was such a privilege to be able to be there without that burden of having to compete with a 30-year-old, of having to be anything more than I was myself. The privilege of playing your age and still being in charge and still kind of, having all of these traits. I think only a woman could have that.
Do you see your sister now is is in the industry as well? Are things better when you look at her journey from what they were when you were starting out at her age?
Well, there's a lot more money, and I'm not sure that's exactly why it's tougher. I think there's a lot more riding on all of them. There's a lot more that they need to live up to. Social media, for example, is something that we didn't have. But yet people were able to kind of pick up every detail of our life somehow magically, thanks to the stardust and the celebrities of the world, and kind of, that followed you around for years and years and years. But I think that things were more organic then. I don't think that everyone really has the privilege of being themselves as much as we did back then. But even then, I mean, I was told by a lot of people that you want to be successful, learn to curtail your opinion, be seen and not heard that much. Do what you need to do and do it behind closed doors. I didn't see why. I felt that I owed it to people who were going out there and buying my ticket to see the real me on and off screen. And I think that whenever I went out into the real world and met people, men and women, I think that what gratified me the most was that, yes, we love your film and we love your performance, but we love the way you are, because we can hear ourselves in you, or we can see ourselves in you. There was a relatability factor because I was just myself, and I can't take credit for that, Faye. It's just the way I'm engineered, it's just the way I am. Like I said, I mean, courage is not hereditary. I think that Alia's smarter and more successful, and she's very clear about what she wants to let out there to the world to consume and whatnot. And that's the way she chooses to live her life, and I applaud her for that. But I think that she's a better version of me for sure. And I think every generation must get better than the other. There's a flaw in the family tree in that sense. So I have great admiration for her because she's so in charge of her destiny in that sense. But I think that that 21-year hiatus that I took, where forget about the world. The world doesn't write you off. The world is kind. My very own wrote me off. I was called a has-been within my own family. Until, of course, I could laugh about it and say to my family member that, you have to have been to be a has-been. So I'm not going to let these traits or these terms define me. And I think that I am where I am today because I've been able to be like an open wound. I've been able to live my life like an open book. And I think that I take responsibility for who I am, good, bad, or ugly. And I'm able to live with that truth. I own it. Because if I don't, who will?
Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time in this conversation, but it's been such a wonderful chat. I wish we had more time. I wish we could talk longer. And I do hope that, as someone who has watched your career as a young person when your first few films came out, I hope to see so much more of you as an artist and you as a storyteller in the future.
But I think these are exciting times for women my age, and I think that I just want to say out to all the women who are who've been told by everybody, you're past your prime. No, the people who think that you don't have imagination, you're never past your prime. So I think that don't stop just living your life with a great deal of audacity, because there's no dress rehearsal. This is the only shot you got, so just go out there and do it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for speaking with me, Pooja.
Thank you, Faye.
Much love and much support to you always.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
To our audience, I hope you found that conversation helpful. You can always leave me a note if you want more of these conversations. We'll make them happen. Remember, the news is up at exactly 9 o'clock. You have a good weekend, and I will see you back here tomorrow at 8 o'clock for an evening. Thank you for watching.